Okay, so welcome to Redbrick. This is my cellar space just behind me here, and I want the sign to go up there, but I've just measured across to the units. Let me just flip you around to the other side, because then what I can do is I'm going to put a piece of 3x2 across the top so it's hanging down alright. Doing my best to make sure no one's getting filmed. It's fantastic down here. If you haven't been down before, it's in the Baltic Triangle, the brewery village down in Liverpool. Thoroughly recommend you come and take a look. Anyway, enough chit chat from me. So I've measured up 2.2 meters across, so I know where my sign's going to go. I've stocked up and I best get off. Alright folks, hello again, welcome back to my channel and a video that promises a bit of everything. A simple introduction to the XTool XCS software, a bit of resin work, some proper woodwork and a near miss with a router table. More on that later. If there are any parts of this video you have no interest in, then I'll have chapters in the description and a pinned comment below. So the plan is to make a sign for my cellar space at the Redbrick Market. My logo was the obvious choice, so I decided to cut the design on my XTool S1 20-watt laser. I just want to demonstrate how simple it is to use their software in comparison to something like Lightburn that I found rather overcomplicated. Here I imported a JPEG image of my logo. The first thing I did was to remove the white background using the edit tool. I can adjust the logo to the size required and move it around if needed. Then if I click the trace icon, it will convert the file in order for the design to be cut on the laser. I let the software know what material is being cut, in this case 6mm plywood, and it automatically sets the speed and power of the laser. It also has an auto measure feature that digitally calibrates how far the laser is from the material. Once this is completed, I can frame the material and check it is in the correct place. Hit the start button and leave the laser to do its thing. I will be cutting 2 of these logos as the sign is going to be back to back. If you are interested in any XTool products, then I do have an affiliate link in the description, and I'd just like to thank XTool for supplying me this laser to review. I do have an unboxing and setup video on my channel about the XTool S1 if you'd like to check that out. On to the next stage and creating the meat in the sandwich, so to speak. For this I'm going to be using some Craft Resin, which I've been testing now for quite some time. I've recently teamed up with the good folk at Craft Resin, who have very kindly given me a discount code for my subscribers. So if you're thinking of trying a Craft Resin product out and use the discount code HANDCRAFT10 at the checkout, you'll get 10% off the range. Again, I'll leave affiliate links in the description, separate ones for the UK, the EU and the USA. You've seen me make these moulds many times on my channel, so I'm not going into much detail here, but if you click that link up in the top corner, it will give you a complete video on how to make these moulds. The Craft Resin I'm using is the 24-hour curing resin, which uses a 1:1 mix ratio by volume. Remember to take your time when mixing the resin, nice and slow, you're not trying to whisk egg whites. I mixed in a bit of purple pigment which matches my logo, and I think it'll look pretty smart as a backdrop to the sign. So at the end of day 1, I've got my 2 logos cut and the resin backdrop left to cure overnight, ready for the next stage tomorrow. The following day I peeled off the polypropylene mould and checked the sizing against the laser cut logos. With resin moulds I always make them slightly oversized so they can be cut down later, giving them a nice straight edge. I decided with this build project to see how well the Craft Resin polishes up, starting with 120 grit right through the grits to a 3000 grit pad before finishing with some cutting compound and a wet sponge pad. Again, I did this on both sides and I have to say I was very impressed with the results. No micro scratches, and I would happily put this up to the close-up light test. I decided the best way to fix the logo to the resin was to use hot glue, as the frame I'll be making later will secure everything in place. One thing I was unsure about though was how to accurately fix the centres of the A and the D letters in the logo. I thought it'd be easier to put the cut letter in, then with a drop of O3ACA glue, fix the centres in place, then remove the cut letter. Kind of reminded me of that game Operation I played as a kid. As you can see here though, I was as useless at removing the letter as I was at playing Operation. I happened to show this video clip on my social media, and a much more intelligent person than me suggested using a small screw into the letter and then removing it by hand. If I'd have known this technique beforehand, it would have saved me a lot of time and swearing. Now that both sides are fixed, I trim all the edges using my Bench Dogs quad hinge rail system, fence and track saw. A quick sand down, and I decided to use the Heidelberg Pro Lignum hard wax oil that I get from Rob at Amicus UK. Again, link in the description. I decided it'd be easier to use this than it was my own wax finish, as I envisaged getting bits of my semi-solid wax stuck in the lettering, meaning I'd have to pick it out and probably break something. That was the plan anyway, but more on that later. Onto the woodworking bit that I promised you earlier, and I think this is a piece of Iroko. Let me know what you think in the comments. I cut some slices of this Iroko on the bandsaw that I forgot to film, and then tidied it up on the planer thicknesser. This is going to form quite a chunky frame around the logo, almost in the style of an old pub sign. It was at this stage I realised the hot glue idea was probably not my finest. Although it bonded well to the resin, there was some variance in the overall thickness of the sign. I checked around with my calipers and the thickest point appeared to be around 20mm. I wanted to recess a groove into the frame that would keep everything nice and tight, almost like a shaker style door. I could then chamfer the outer edges of the frame, which would help draw your eyes into the logo. In my Trend Tools router bit set, I found a straight bit that was just under 18mm. So my plan was to find the centre line of the piece, set up the router table fence offset by 2mm from the centre of the Iroko, then a few passes through the router table adjusting the height to the eventual recessed depth. All this went according to plan. However, I then adjusted the router fence 2mm backwards to pass through again, which would give me my 20mm wide recess, but I forgot to adjust the feather boards accordingly, and this happened. The featherboards would have secured the piece to the fence, however with me not adjusting them everything was loose, and when the piece touched the router it flung it against the fence and shot it out of the back. Thankfully no harm done, and after a change of underwear it was back to finishing the frame. The sign now sits well into the recess, so the next stage is to cut the mitered corners ready for the glue up. Back to the router table first to chamfer the internal edges. Now obviously there are different methods of cutting 45° miters, but I find my most consistent and accurate way is to use my miter saw, cutting the angles in the upright position. I cut the first miter, then reference the piece against the sign to get the starting point for the opposite side and work my way around until all 4 pieces are cut. A quick dry fit to check everything fits okay, then we can move on to the glue up, and by now you should know my go-to glue. Link to that video in the top corner. As I also featured in last week's video, I'm using these Stanley band clamps, which work great and are found to be excellent value for money at around £22 for a pair. I've got a link in the description if you're interested in them, and there's also a link to my Amazon storefront which features virtually all of the equipment I use in my workshop. I sanded down the frame and applied a coat of my own wax finish, which you can purchase via my website. I got a little bit carried away though with the wax, getting some on the logo section, so in the end everything ended up getting a coat of my wax, and I have to admit it really did help to pop the grain even more. Finally, I attached a couple of eye bolts and we're ready to head back to the Redbrick Market. Okay, so it's install day. The stand is behind me there. Now I've got to get a beam across the top from one side to the other, which is fine, we can do that. The only issue is, I don't know if you can see next to me, the cellar space next to me is all glass. I have to get a few of them shifted before I start getting up the step ladder. Alright, let's see how it goes.
Nice to meet you, mate. All right, take care. All right. Anyway. Yeah, good to have a chat. Thanks very much.
So that's it folks, a crazy amount of work trimmed down to around 16 minutes. If you have made it this far, I hope you don't mind me asking if you can give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I think the sign looks really smart, and if you're ever in Liverpool, make sure to visit the Redbrick Market. As ever folks, take care, look after yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.